Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Disruption Talks with Netguru. I'd like to welcome all the viewers back, and we've got a really exciting episode this week. Throughout the episodes, we go through meeting tons of different people from different areas of tech throughout the world, different industries. Last week, we had Kareem, a super app based out in the Middle East, and today we've got one of the most exciting challenger banks that are starting up in the UK down in London. Their name is Kroo, and I would like to welcome to the stage their head of product, Thomas.
Hi, good morning, Sean. Hi, everybody.
Good morning, Tom. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good. No, thank you for coming on. I think for us, this is like a really exciting topic because in 2021 alone, there was 72 challenger banks launched in globally, and this just shows the kind of the growth of the market in comparison to traditional banks that we've had in the past, and the kind of revolution of tech itself within the financial services space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you can see how there's a lot of disruption happening and there's a lot of players in the market. So yeah, keen to get into it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So we'll go through the kind of usual format, and we'll get to the business Kroo itself and like a bit of the industry as well. But before that, I'd like to welcome everyone who's watching. If you're here, feel free to drop a like on the video, comment on the video, share some kind of awareness of the episode so we can bring in the viewing figures. And let's start with a bit of conversation about you yourself. So maybe you can give like a bit of a short personal introduction before we get started.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as you mentioned before, I'm Tom, head of product at Kroo. We've been building for coming up to a good 4 years now. We also have a product in market, but I'm sure we'll come on to that later on. Been working in fintech and I guess product management for 9 years now across insurtech previous to this. So I bought by many, which many of your viewers would know, I'm sure. And then before that, City Index and Forex.com, which was a CFD trading platform. And, you know, really, I think the way that technology has changed, I think just everyone's personal lives and where it's touched, it's a fascinating space to play in, particularly fintech. And I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the growth, well, not just globally, but particularly in London as well, which is kind of where you're based. This seeing huge growth in the fintech space, and I think it's kind of becoming one of the fintech capitals of the world, should we say?
Yeah, and it's just such a hot marketplace and industry, right? You can the landscape shifting so fast that you can take it in lots of different directions, and that's really exciting. I think for any young people looking to get into the industry, that's just exciting, right? Just as a baseline.
Yeah, definitely.
And the possibilities are pretty much what if you can think of it, you can do it these days in terms of technology.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity for kind of not just like innovation, but also like financial education as well, which I think we missed, 15, 20 years ago in kind of my generation or our generation growing up. They missed that, not just the kind of understanding of how finance works, but also the understanding how banking industry works and how to manage your money properly, that kind of thing, which is, I guess, how Kroo kind of like was formed, right? To call this like social platform and raise like proper awareness of the fintech industry and banking.
Yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about how Kroo started then. So the founders, Nazim and Tim, were back in, I think, 2014 now, maybe 2015, were in a cafe and they were sharing coffee. And what they were thinking about was how money was really siloed. If you think back then, we didn't have Monzo, Starling, and Revolut who have really led the way in terms of the challenger neobank space.
Yeah.
And when money left your account, you didn't know if it arrived. People still follow that tradition of sending a text message straight after a payment, right? To see, oh yeah, I sent that through. Splitting bills was really hard, and they really had this vision that money shouldn't be so opaque and actually should be frictionless and not have the anxiety that it had at the time, and should move between people freely. And so Kroo has kind of developed with that mission in mind, to become the greatest social bank. And that means kind of three things for us. It's got to work for you as an individual, which is where that kind of financial education comes into it. It's got to work for your friends and your family. And that's where that money movement between people comes in. And it's also got to work for the planet and for society at large. When we're really thinking about how we can help our customers be better global citizens in that sense, we know that people want to do more in this space. So, for example, we spoke to a particular customer who they knew they wanted to do more, but the furthest their social efficacy went was buying oat milk at the shops. So how can Kroo kind of help them, steer them to kind of make better decisions?
Okay, nice. So there's some sort of like socio-economic responsibility you feel as well.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
I like that. Okay, cool. So that's kind of how Kroo became a reality, I guess. What about so you've received like Series A funding, I think in the last kind of 6 months or so. So congratulations firstly on that.
Thank you.
And what's kind of in the crosshairs for the next kind of 2 years then to be developed?
Yeah, really good question. So we have our e-money accounts with a debit card in market today. We also received our banking license back in the summer of 21, which has restrictions at the moment, and we're looking to launch as a bank with a current account and overdraft in the summer. And so really what's in the crosshairs now is kind of building the bank and launching the bank, because when you're an e-money institution, you leverage a lot of the license from a third party, in our case, PayRnet and Railsbank. So we've got to take on that responsibility as an entity, in terms of meeting all of our regulations, regulatory requirements as a bank, which is different to e-money institutions.
Yeah. Sure.
All of the reporting pieces. So immediate crosshairs, we've got to launch, and there's a lot to do, and we're really busy on doing that at the moment. And then thereafter, it's really how can we lean into that mission statement that I mentioned before about making it work for the individual, for your friends and family, and for the planet. And we've got lots of, I guess, ideas on there. So, for example, kind of joint sub accounts where you can move money between individuals really easily. We're also looking really closely at carbon offset and so can we, for example, calculate the carbon footprint of your purchases and enable you to offset that with one of our trusted partners. We're already partnered with One Tree Planted today, where if you refer a friend, we'll plant a tree on your behalf. And also our cards are biodegradable now. So if you were to leave your card in compost and come back from 450 days, it wouldn't be there anymore, apart from the chip.
Feel like my bank balance.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we're looking at how we can really lean into that mission over the next 2 years.
That's really nice. So you have like obviously big lofty goals, but also you're keeping kind of what many people class as kind of sustainable finance at the heart of your kind of mission. And I think that's it's very different to a lot of companies on the market, right? So their sole growth is customer acquisition and revenue, whereas you've kind of like got, you've got the product at hand, you want to build it out in a organic way, but also like, whilst keeping kind of social responsibility, economic responsibility, and kind of looking after the environment in many different facets, whether it's planting a tree. So, I think it's really like clever idea, and there's obviously a lot to do in that time. And with that growth, you've got to, I guess, hire people who share the similar mindset to you. So obviously London's a competitive marketplace, not just for like technical people, but for many roles. How do you find recruitment with also the mission in mind when you're trying to hire people as well?
So culture fit is nearly as important, or it's not nearly, it is as important as the technical skills, right?
Yeah.
How you work with people is fundamental to the success of the business overall. we spend a lot of time on that in terms of understanding what's the culture fit, how do they work, are they going to really bring value to the company, or are they going to drag us and hold us back, because of that culture. And the mission part is definitely attracting a certain demographic of employee, which is great because we really do believe in the vision and the mission. It's part of our DNA, and so we want our fellow colleagues to come in and live and breathe it as we do. So we spend a lot of time on the culture fit side, obviously a lot of time on the technical piece as well. Is the market competitive? Hugely in London. So, for example, we have quite a distributed model in terms of our employees. So, yes, whilst a lot of our colleagues are based in London, we have colleagues in India. We've got some colleagues in the Northwest. For example, our COO is based up in the Northwest of England. And I guess that's what a byproduct of the COVID pandemic. We were forced to go remote overnight. I think previously we were always in the office, almost frowned upon to kind of work from home prior to. I'm sure everybody's got a little bit of an experience of that. But we tried it. We trialed it on a Friday. We were like, right, we're going to have a work from home day as a trial on Friday, and we never went back. In terms of mandating being back in the office. Today the pandemic's obviously moved on. We're now working in a bit of a hybrid model where it's optional to come in. It's based on your team. The teams will work out what they feel is necessary. And so as a growing business, and we as part of the latest funding round, we're going to be looking to double in size over the course of the next year. Where people are based is becoming less of a priority as to their technical and cultural fit, if you like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I guess you also have the positive benefits of the reduced carbon footprint with less travel from your employees as well. So again, I guess keeping mission in mind as well. That's separate beneficial.
Yeah, it's not only on the customer side that we think about this. So, for example, we're looking at our supply chain. So, who are our third parties? What are their social commitments? Whether that's to their employees or whether that's to the planet as well. So, we're asking as part of our due diligence now, what are your carbon targets, as well as do you have some extra policies on top of, I guess, what would be traditional due diligence? So it's not only because Kroo isn't an island in this. We employ lots of third parties who have a much bigger impact than we do right now. And so we think about it not only from the customer side, but also from the industry side and what our footprint is as well.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the true meaning of responsible, the responsible actions, because you're not just, looking after, say, for example, at home, if I'm doing my recycling and that's my part taken care of, but if you're raising awareness and looking at the people around you, making sure they're doing their part as well, then that's going way beyond the kind of just sole responsibility of it. And you kind of looking to make sure you match that all the way across the business and with other partners that you use as well. I think that's great.
Yeah, you mentioned growth before, and whilst we might not be, we don't have the scale or the size of existing challenges. Why would we? We haven't got to the market at this point in time, but we're thinking about it now as part of our fundamentals. Because if we can employ it now and ensure we stick to those fundamentals as we grow, that's going to be much easier for us to make a greater impact than if in 5 years' time we suddenly have a green focus, and try to implement it in 5 years' time. It's going to be, I'm sure companies are kind of going through that pain at the moment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess that makes total sense. Doing it once you've sustained that growth is much more difficult to reset and realign everyone from the inside out than your kind of method where you're doing it as you're growing currently. Yeah, makes total sense. Netguru are also a B Corp as well, so we take social responsibility and environmental responsibility and everything very, very seriously here. We have person dedicated to that in particular as well. Okay, cool. So let's go back and talk about like your role. So you're head of product at Kroo. I guess many people have seen Kroo advertised or heard about them due to kind of like the growth that you've had in the early stages. So people have different versions of what product means as like a role. So how do you define like your role as like, or how do you define head of product at Kroo?
So head of product at Kroo really looks at how our company strategy is meeting up to our product strategy. And so,
Okay.
and the way we've formatted our teams is in the tribes and squads, squads and tribes structure that most people would understand. So they're cross-functional, but we base them on either on the customer verticals or the area or the experience verticals. So for example, we've got a team that looks after the accounts and the account experience. We've got a team dedicated to payments and the payment experience. We're as a bank, we make money through lending, and so we're building out our lending platform at the moment. And so we've got a team dedicated to that, as well as security and platform at the moment. So part of the role is to try to stitch these together and make sure that the experience is coherent, but also whilst we work in autonomous squads as well. So it's effectively giving light touch governance to allowing the teams to hit the targets in the way that they see fit. Now, as a bank, you need oversight and you need governance, and we have policies in place to enable that to happen. But on a weekly basis, it's about ensuring that these teams are aligned in what they're trying to do and that they're looking to make an impact on our company goals. We use the OKR framework. So we plan on a 3-month cadence with where our company goals might stretch a little bit longer than that. And so we believe in that kind of consistency of approach in terms of defining which KPIs each team is targeting over a long period of time to have that impact. And so it's about identifying as well and prioritizing where's important to focus on. And that might be on our operational stack. It might be on the customer side. It might be on, the platform itself. And so it's really, I guess, also playing that alignment role throughout the business, and so ensuring that all of our stakeholders from compliance to finance, customer service, are all on the same page as well.
Okay, so you're kind of like almost like a horizontal role across like these different tribes.
A little bit, we in our product tribe, if you like, the team will be having those touch points with all of their stakeholders on a daily basis quite often. And so it's about ensuring that the product tribe is aligned, with the CPO, who is Nazim, the co-founder. And so really trying to make that vision come to life as well, and helping to shape that, and by through I guess being closer to the customer in that sense.
Yeah. Okay. So what does the usual day look like? Do you have kind of like a standard like day or week that well, I guess no week is the same in product, but how does that usually look for you?
General day or week, I mean, it's ever changing at Kroo. We keep hitting our milestones, and so the challenge is, what's that saying where there's always problems. They're just new problems to solve, right? So what you might be working on today probably won't be what you'll be working on in a month's time. So for example, one of the things we're looking at is how we transition really from offering one product to another, and how do we kind of ensure that the launch is going to be a success in the summer. So we're working really hard on identifying the gaps which we need to fill in that time period.
Sure. So a lot of a lot of crazy management changing constantly. I think the fun difference is when we see the difference when we're interviewing people from like fast growing startups to enterprises, that fast growing startups are often picking up different roles, like doing lots of different things, wearing many hats constantly on a weekly basis. And the enterprise ones tend to be more like, they have their stuff ready and in motion because they've already got like a defined product, and it's less kind of, less stuff to work on in the early stages, I think.
Well, yeah, I think like a good way of thinking about it is that we're still a small firm. I don't think we've crossed 100 employees yet. I think we're somewhere in the 80 to 90 region today. And so one of my true beliefs is a good idea can come from anywhere. And so the roles, the lines can blur quite a lot. So for example, compliance might have some input on the customer experience, and that's okay because we're all aligned on what we're trying to do. We don't have I would say strict disciplines because principally we don't believe in the pass the parcel approach. It's better that you have the cross collaboration that you have across roles, and that we believe ends up in a better outcome for sure. So
I think if you don't have that sorry.
No, it's all right. I was just going to say, looking back at your example of kind of fast growing early stage against enterprise, I guess that's a good example of a key difference there.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you don't have the collaboration at that early stage, then there's always going to be gaps that don't get filled, right? You need to be kind of people who like share across the multiple teams and can be a bit more flexible in the approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So we have some questions rolling in. I have a good question here from Katarzyna Brzonka. So it says, Tom, I have a question for you. What is your process for understanding what your current or future customers' wants and needs are? What kind of research or feedback loops do you have in place?
Great question. So we have an automated survey tool which runs in the app, which enables us to set up, ask questions of our customers on the fly. What's the pain points? What are you liking? What's missing? And so we can gather this feedback automatically, and that's event-based driven. So when we launch a feature and somebody uses it, we can then survey them straight away. So it's really flexible there. We also have 2 in-house researchers who are doing a brilliant job of kind of talking to our customers on a regular basis. We agree the topics or to understand in a more in-depth manner, and we'll work together on kind of answering those questions. Customer service are a key part. So they're talking to customers on a daily basis. So we'll have bi-weekly conversations with them to understand what they're experiencing from customers. And we also have less on the qualitative side and more on the quant side. We've got a huge amount of data from our BI tools, so we use Mixpanel for our customer analytics, as well as our server-side data is highlighted through Tableau, for example. So we look to pick up trends from all of these sources, and then we look to dig in a little bit deeper through more high-touch research through user interviews, principally, and other survey tools. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, it's quite interesting, this approach. I've never heard of it, or maybe I've never seen it being done before. Actually, it's a very clever way is gathering that feedback while you have someone in app and using the new feature whilst it's fresh in their kind of mind. I think that makes total sense, and I'm surprised I've not come across that before, or maybe I'm forgetting if I have. But yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thank you for the question, Kasia. We have other ones as well that are coming in on LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever they're coming from. So I'll get to those in a second. I just want to talk to you about building a bank, right? Because it's like a difficult challenge, especially from product side, from tech side. And you've worked in different industries. So you've worked in like insurtech, for example. How does building a bank differ from like your previous tech companies you've worked from the product side?
Yeah, so building a bank is almost completely different to building any kind of business because it's highly regulated. So in order to launch, you have to meet lots of, I guess, to break it down into kind of product and tech, you've got to build a lot of stuff, a lot of features, and you've got to prove that they meet all of the regulations before you can even launch as a bank. Traditionally, at other kind of startups or technology companies, you would start really small and build out from there. So for example, if you wanted to build like a product management tool, you might start off with like an ability to create some kind of tickets and the ability to change their state, and then you could launch and kind of get feedback that way. Whereas as a bank, you've got to meet all of the KYC requirements, you've got to meet all of the payment requirements, reporting, finance and legal, and so the bar to entry is just so much higher as a result. And so that's why it's taken us quite a bit of time to get to where we are. There's also, I guess, a very different part to funding a bank than it is to other traditional startups. So, for example, we have to hold money as in what's called capital requirements to ensure that we can process payments and we can facilitate customer money movement, which effectively you raise that money and then you just have to hold it. You're not able to use that to spend on, say, technology or people, which other technology companies don't have to deal with. So from that perspective, building a bank, particularly a technology bank, is very different to building other startups. But once you hit that entry level, you've got a lot in place. So for example, we built out our whole transaction monitoring and financial crime products. Our payments platform is nearly completed. So for example, we're working on Apple Google Pay for our bank launch. We're also building out all of the reporting that we have to do as a bank. We have to send lots of reports to the regulators to let them know how we're getting on. And there's also, I guess, another key stakeholder, which is not only your investor and your customers, but also the regulator, who is kind of like an investor as well, in the sense that you have to write a business application to them. They have to approve it. They can push back and say, you need to make some changes. So they're almost like a different kind of investor in Kroo, in the sense that, they're investing their, I guess, their remit, their governance in Kroo. So by them giving us a seal of approval, which we hope they will, this in Q3, and I'm sure they will. They're giving us that seal of approval as well. So that's another stakeholder which other tech companies wouldn't have to deal with on traditionally.
Yeah, for sure. Or definitely not to that level anyway.
No.
Like that level of detail, granular detail. Okay, so you may not be able to answer this. I don't know whether I just want to talk about when you do launch. Like, are you launching to the UK only, or do you have plans to
UK only?
Yeah.
For in the summer, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'll look out for it when it gets launched. Perfect. So we'll nip to some more questions on LinkedIn. So we have one from Christoph, who's one of the senior innovation consultants in Netguru. He says, how do you create a differentiation with your product compared to the rest of the industry?
This is a challenge, really, of Kroo. How do we differentiate? How do we provide value to our customers where that they can't get elsewhere? And one of, I guess, there's a product leader called Gibson Bedell. He used to be the CPO at Netflix, and one of his teachings, and he's got a lot of essays online, so anybody who's interested, go and look that up. where he talks about making things which are margin enhancing in hard to copy ways. And so what is it that Kroo can provide that other businesses can't? Now, in the fintech banking space, there's a lot that can be copied, because of how regulated it is. If it meets the regulation, generally other banks can copy it. So where else can we differentiate? Our lending team has built its own credit decision engine, which is based on data that we hold and on our customers, and the decisioning that we make is really one of our USPs. So to give you an example or a comparison, Oak North, for example, what their success is based on making better decisions when it comes to lending than their competitors, and that includes lending to the right customer, lending the right amount, which they might not be able to achieve elsewhere. And so, that's one way that Kroo is really seeing itself being differentiated. But also the values piece, that's really hard to copy. And so pardon me. And so by living and breathing that, we know that customers, I think there was a survey by Spotify quite recently about customers want to identify and work with brands who match their values. And so this is also a place where really Kroo can differentiate.
Yeah, definitely. I think you really have like the values at the heart of your business, and I think a lot of people are looking for that something different in financial services space that can match that. So I guess Kroo can be that partner essentially for these people who are looking for more, social, responsible banking company. Okay, cool. So we have a question here, but I want to ask the person to give a bit more detail. He said, "Are you thinking of partnering with any established companies or other service providers?" So I was wondering if this made sense to you, or whether we need more detail on the question, as in any particular area of the business, or how do you feel about answering that?
Let me try and answer Richard's question, and then Richard, maybe if you want to ask a follow-up, feel free. So
Sure.
We have as a small bank, if you like, or a small financial institution, we pick and choose between what we build or what we buy. So, for example, we outsource our card processor, we outsource who handles all of our kind of card payments and our integration with the network that we have, the card network. We outsource, for example, to who prints the cards. We outsource to a direct connector to the banking payment schemes like faster payments and direct debits, because for us to build that ourselves would be effectively building those companies ourselves. And would require a huge amount of funding. However, there are some things which we want to build in-house, and that's a part of our core value. I mentioned the credit decision engine before, but there's lots of other areas about where we build that in-house, because we believe that that's core to our business and it's core to our values and our proposition. So when we're looking to build out any new piece of new functionality, we always go through this process of, is it better to outsource this to a third-party provider, or is it better for us to build it? And in some instances, it makes sense to buy from an established company or service provider, Richard. And in other instances, we build that in-house.
Perfect. Well, we'll see if he comes back with a follow-up, but I think that was good coverage, to be fair. Okay, so we have one from our very own Sophia. She asks, how does product management work with your executive leadership, and what tips can you give to new and established companies in understanding the role of product management and its increasing influence and responsibility in driving a successful organization?
So this is a real good question, because this is, I guess, a constant struggle, or can be a constant struggle at other companies. Does product management lead and the company follows, or is it the company directing product what's essentially where to work and what to focus on? The way we've set ourselves up at Kroo is there are company goals which which we need to achieve, which could be revenue, growth, engagement, and in product's role is to work out to how to meet those goals. So, for example, if we need to achieve a certain level of growth this year, product will work with the other areas of the business to work out how we can help facilitate, reaching those goals. So it's a real partnership. So, for example, we're able to feed into the goals to say, okay, that's quite interesting, but have you thought about this? Ultimately, leadership, the executive leadership will make that call, and then product is job is then to work out how best to get there. And some things are straightforward, i.e., let's say we want to scale to 200,000 customers by the end of the year. We'll take a look at all of our systems and processes and go, where are the bottlenecks and what do we need to improve, whether that's say on the customer ops side or whether it's on the onboarding side, for example. And some things are less clear, which might be we need to earn a particular amount of revenue this year. And so product that's a little bit more, I would say, opaque as to how you can get there. You could look at, say, subscriptions, you could look at lending, you could look at all kinds of different areas. And so product's role then would be to work out how we can kind of meet those targets.
Yeah, I guess that's a more difficult question to work out the answer to. It's so where can we increase revenue is different to okay, what's stopping us being able to scale to meet 200,000 customers? Because looking at the bottlenecks is I guess something that you can do by an internal review, and you can mark those areas, improve those areas. The revenue piece is much more of a forward-thinking ideation kind of piece, right? You almost become an innovator on the product side as such.
Well, ultimately, we believe that those closest to the customer understands their problems best, and so can then inform the wider business as to how to kind of solve those problems. I think if for other companies that were struggling with this, I would start really small in terms of what's a small target that you can set, and then pass that across to a group of people, normally the product team, and say, come up with a proposal as to how we can kind of get there. We work in hypothesis-based development, looking at our outcomes. So we might hypothesize that by, for example, solving this problem is going to help in drive engagement by, say, 10%, for example. And so we're very upfront with our executive leadership to say that this is not cast iron guarantee that if we make this change, this is going to work, but this is what we believe, and here is the evidence to back it up.
Okay, so another tip was that there's some sort of expectation management that you need to provide with your exec leadership.
Sure, expectation setting is super important. You've got to align those expectations above you and below you, and to ensure that everybody's on the same page. And if you're not on the same page, potentially you need to look at yourself as the individual to say, my expectations aren't meeting what the leadership's expectations are, and so I need to change that, and so I need to think bigger or I need to think smaller. But alternatively, you might say that there's there's things which are holding us back from achieving what the executive want, and so there might need to be a reconciliation that way as well.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Good question, Sophia. Thanks for that. So you talked about the kind of release of your idea to be releasing as a bank in the summertime, but I guess you're constantly thinking of future work as well outside of that scope. So my question is more about the industry. There's lots of trends at the moment. So the digital asset space is seeing high growth, as is the buy now, pay later space. Are there any current trends that you're like monitoring for potential additions to the platform after launch?
So something we looked at, particularly during the pandemic, was, I guess, how has this really affected people? And I don't think it's going to be particularly a surprise to anybody, but there are winners and losers during the pandemic. Those who got to work from home in high-paying jobs, saw their level of savings really grow in that time. And then there were those who were in the UK furloughed or made unemployed as a result, and they saw their cash flow really reduce in that time. And paying bills became a struggle. In that time period, and so there's really two kind of key customer segments there, aren't there? So for those people who have large deposits, digital assets is obviously seen a huge growth in the past year and a half, whether that's on the stocks side, whether that's on the crypto side, whether that's just savings in general, putting money into, say, stocks and shares ISAs or cash ISAs. So that's a particular area where we're thinking, how can we tap into that in a way that meets Kroo's mission? And so digital assets are definitely a part of our strategy going forward. And then on the flip side, I think where people have seen a reduction in their income, or they've seen a fall in their cash flow, they need tools to be able to manage those. So, and that's really where I think buy now, pay later / installments comes in. And so the ability to kind of spread the cost of your payments over a period of time, particularly for high value items. That's how Kroo can help make an impact there. Buy now, pay later is a bit of a interesting phenomenon over the past couple of years. Why are people more interested in that than, say, other traditional forms of credit? Is it because they understand the payments more? Is it because of that we mentioned kind of financial understanding and education? Is it because it's just simpler for people to understand? So we're looking at it closely. We haven't made any firm commitments internally on our side, but we're looking at both the digital asset side, or how can we help people with large deposits or larger deposits, and then also how can we help people on the cash flow side. So, for example, can we be smart with the data that we provide to customers to preempt some kind of actions in the future? So, for example, if we know that their current spending rate means that they're going to go into their overdraft by the end of the month, can we kind of prevent that, with some smart notifications, as an example? How can we help people understand where their money's going and potentially offer alternatives as well? So there's lots of this particular area. Well, these two areas are really what we'll be focusing on post-launch, I would say.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. We did a buy now, pay later report, actually, Netguru, where we interviewed like industry experts, and we also did a podcast and show on LinkedIn about it. And I think like our main point was that traditional financing or lending was like slower than buy now, pay later. So you get to the end of a till, there's an option just to do this buy now, pay later. Does the credit stuff in the background, so it's almost like it's almost Uberizing lending. I know that Uberizing seems to become a word in my dictionary at the moment, but that's like that. It feels like that ease of lending is there, and that's why there's seen such high growth in that place. But also like where Kroo could be great is that they don't really. I don't think that many players in that space give much education behind buy now, pay later, and there's still potential risks to it. It's not different in traditional lending to the fact that you have to make repayments, you have to be on time, and people misunderstand, I think, the uses of that as well.
Yeah, the real danger is where somebody is using buy now, pay later to effectively enable them to pay existing debt down.
Yeah.
And so they get caught in a cycle of bad debt repayments. It's something we're aware of. For example, if you were to spend on Klarna or Afterpay, that doesn't get reported to the credit agencies, and so that prevents banks and other fintechs from making better decisions as a result. So we would be very keen to see a little bit of regulation come in to force them to share with credit agencies, so that everybody's aware of what an individual's financial situation is, so that we can prevent lending to somebody who can't really afford it.
Yeah, exactly. So it comes back to the smart money education again. And I guess this point you mentioned about the notifications, managed like almost like a virtual assistant, trying to help the person manage their money better. I think is that is also another high growth area, I think, in finance, because like we say, I think over the past kind of decade, financial education hasn't been where it's meant to be, and we've seen a lot of people go into debt, not because they, not because of faults of their own, but because of bad education on how to manage, how to manage their finances.
And the brilliant thing is, Kroo will have the data on that individual, in terms of the spending patterns, where they spend, how much, how often. So we'll have the data to be able to inform that customer in a way that they could never do themselves. So why wouldn't we leverage that? Why wouldn't we enable that, to help customers, and that's really comes back to that. I know we've mentioned it a number of times, comes back to that mission, and also helps drive that brand advocacy that we really want to achieve as a company, so that people go, I really love using Kroo because it really helps me on the day-to-day.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Well, look, I'm really, really excited to see the launch in the summertime or Q3. I can't wait to see kind of what you guys achieve, and really excited for the future of Kroo. So we've got one last question that we like to ask everyone before we end the show, and it's more of a question, essentially a fun question, basically. So we say, if you had a magic wand and you could cast a spell that allows you to provide education on a specific topic to all 12-year-olds in the world, what would it be, and what would you want them to learn?
Wow. So I think what I've learned in my career today is, really, if you want to be able to do something and you're really passionate about making that happen, you can do it. You might have to go down a few rabbit holes to get there, but you shouldn't be held back by your ambitions. If you really want to get somewhere and you really want to make that happen, you can achieve that, as long as you work hard and you're willing to take on that personal responsibility. I think, and so to every 12-year-old out there, I doubt there are many watching this, but who knows? that would be my one tip.
Yeah. So if you want something hard enough, you just got to go for it, and you might stumble along the way, but if you persevere hard enough and you got the passion, you'll get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really nice sentiment. Perfect. Okay, I guess that's it for today. I want to thank everyone who's tuned into watching. I want to also remind everyone that we are now launching on podcast as well, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I think. And so you can go listen to the show retrospectively. I want to thank you again, Tom, for joining us today and giving us a bit of insight into yourself and Kroo. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thanks, Sean.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.